Hello, welcome to It's the Pictures. You are here for episode number 180. I am Evan Crean, and I am joined by my co-host Max Colville. Hey, Max.
How you doing?
I am good. I'm fumbling the intro a little bit. Normally, Max is the one introducing things, but I thought I would give it a shot here. So bear with me, listeners, as I get used to hosting, leading the conversation. Max, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. Evan and I both live up in New England, and while today wasn't the nicest day, yesterday it was the Saturday, the 12th, which is a gorgeous day in New England. We went to a nice little farm where we saw lots of pumpkins and corn and what have you. It was a great day to be outside. How about yourself?
Yeah, I also went outside. We went to the park with our daughter and pushed her on the swing and hung around the playground. We went down the slide, and she was kind of nonplussed about the slide. She didn't hate it. She didn't love it. She felt very neutral. But yeah, agreed. The weather was perfect yesterday. Just the right temperature, a little bit of breeze, not too warm. These are the days you cling to in New England. Those nice fall days. Start to get a little bit chilly, but you still want to go outside.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's just winter. It's depressing.
And like Evan, I didn't go the cinema this weekend, but there was a lot of new movies. Of course, last week the Joker 2 opened, and this week we had, I guess, a Lego documentary on Pharrell. You had
Mm.
Terrifier 3 taking over the box office and becoming like mainstream. Yeah, it was just a really strange weekend at the box office. And I guess if people wanted to go find something interesting, they could find something.
Yeah, no kidding. Those are very disparate choices when it comes to movies. Oh man, I feel like speaking of Terrifier, I watch a lot of horror movies and I'm a little bit anxious about seeing them. I'm not sure if it's gonna be too much blood and guts for me. Have you seen any of those, Max?
No, those are right off my radar. That's not a fun time for me. So,
Yeah.
oh. And Evan, in our line of work of watching a lot of movies for award season, I feel like we're bound to watch things that maybe we don't care to watch all the time.
Mhm.
I'd rather put aside one thing that I know that I don't necessarily have to watch.
That's fair. Yeah, you gotta thin the herd, so to speak, when it comes to the screener pile. So you gotta prioritize, especially when screeners start coming in fast and furious in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So before we get into our main topic today, which is John Carpenter and his filmography, want to talk a little bit about the news here. One of the things we wanted to talk about is that Variety released a list of their 100 best horror movies of all time, and Max sent me this list. I checked it out, and I was quite shocked to learn that I had not seen more of these. Max, how many of this list have you seen out of 100?
I've seen 2/3 of them, or about like 62 of them.
Damn.
So yeah,
And I've seen a measly 39.
yeah, I don't know, Evan, if it's just like with my horror like backlog, I've been watching like a lot of the Universal classic monsters and some of
Mm-hmm.
these older films, and certainly when people make these prestige lists of like, oh, these are like movies you should know, and these were essential for the growth of horror. I mean, like maybe I've seen those, but there's certainly uh, a plethora of horror movies out there that I haven't seen. So I guess like I was the perfect match for this list here.
Yeah. I mean, I was some surprising ones, like The Humans Tend to Be 2. Did not expect that to appear on this list. But a lot of, a lot of the, like you said, the classics that I've heard of, the classic monster movies are in here. I know I was certainly pretty psyched to see Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead, on this list, because that is quite a cuckoo movie if you've never seen it.
That was a movie poster that always scared me at the like Blockbuster Video. Um, I Blockbuster Video. I guess I have to explain Blockbuster Video, Evan, because like I
To
imagine
some
that.
listeners, maybe.
Yeah, the we could rent movies there, and like at the video rental store, it'd be on the shelf, and like be just like the art would be like totally strange and frightening, and I was just like, I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers, pretty gory. Goopy is a word I would use to describe Dead Alive, and also Peter Jackson's early movies, A Bad Taste in Dead Alive. They're pretty over the top, but they're fun. That's for sure.
To think that guy would go on to make the Lord of the Rings trilogy, who would have ever thought?
I know, I know. Were there any movies on the list that you feel like surprised you that made this list, Max?
Um, I made a comment online that I was like, I'm typically more interested in a list like this when like the bottom 50 as opposed to like the top 50, because the expectation that like Texas Chainsaw and The Exorcist and Jaws were going to be up there. It's like I didn't think I was necessarily going to be surprised, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a good thing that I wasn't surprised, because as boring as those choices are, maybe they're the right choices. And as our guest so eloquently mentioned last week, Emily Hughes, is that horror is subjective. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
for some people, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre might not do it for them, but maybe like I don't know, the uncomfortableness of uh, Alien or Silence of the Lambs might do it for them instead. So I don't necessarily know how they picked these for themselves. If they just said, "Oh, I'm gonna pick a list of movies that I really like, or movies that I think are
Mm-hmm.
important for the genre, or necessarily movies that scare them the most." I don't know what they determined was their criteria, because there's certainly a splattering, if you will, for horror of a lot of different movies and genres, and for all intents and purposes, Evan, it's a good list if you're looking for a horror movie that you haven't seen before and um, want to explore in October. I mean, I think that's the best thing I could say about lists like these is that if you look at them and you're like, oh, well, I've never seen that one, maybe I'll add it to my list, and you move on. I think that is the best possible way to approach a list like this. Um,
Yeah, it's
what
true. I
what were your
mean,
general thoughts on it?
I mean, it's I was surprised how few I had seen. That's for sure. Of as someone who feels like they watch a lot of horror, um, I was not surprised that a lot of the ones I had seen were in the kind of like top movies, kind of the horror staples, things like Jaws and Rosemary's Baby and movies like that. Um, yeah, I think I would have liked to know a little bit more about their criteria for choosing these because that's always interesting. And like you, I like to read lists like this, and I often go to them to seek out horror movies I haven't seen before. On top of course, recommendations from friends, fellow critics. That's always fun, and often, whatever Shutter has, because they have a pretty extensive library of horror, and sometimes you're just like, "Ooh, that sounds interesting. I'll give that a try." And you might uncover a hidden gem that you might not be familiar with.
Yeah, and like for me, like on this list, definitely again subjective. Like, say like Suspiria. I know it's not the scariest movie on this list, but I have a lot of fun every time I watch it. So maybe for me, like it would easily be in my top 5 favorite horror movies.
Mm, yep. I was definitely glad to see The Omen on this list. Especially after talking about it last episode with Emily and her saying that she didn't end up putting it in her book, even though it was one that she really enjoyed. Glad to see it made this list.
Yeah, I remember you talking about the first Omen. The movie came out earlier this year, and it's available for people to stream on Hulu if they have that. And I
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to check that out. I think I remember you saying it was pretty good.
Yes, yeah, I really liked it. Um, So two things. One, I think it's great that one of the movies we're going to be talking about on this list, Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, is one we're going to talk about. And then two, just kind of building off what you were saying. Yeah, I've been in kind of religious horror mode this year. The two movies I want to mention in the what we've been watching section are definitely in the similar vein of the first Omen. So that's kind of what I have going on. Um, but one of the other news stories here is that Christopher Nolan is making his next movie with Universal. You know, sticking with them after the smash hit Oppenheimer. But more specifically, there's news that Matt Damon, is in talks to star in that Christopher Nolan vehicle. Of course, we know nothing about what said movie is, but we do know, that Matt Damon has worked very successfully with Nolan in Interstellar as well as Oppenheimer. So could be pretty good collaboration. Max, how do you feel about this news?
Yeah, and we've seen Damon appear in a few different Nolan movies. I mean, I guess at this point, it's celebrating its 10th anniversary and re-releasing in the theaters with Interstellar. It's not much of a surprise now or spoiler to say that Matt Damon is very much in that film.
Yep, in a
He's
great kind of small role, but
yeah,
very memorable.
right. It's like he was not. Well, what a big swing, right, for a movie like that to be like, oh, we have this superstar like Matt Damon in our movie, and we're just like not going to mention that he's in it, and he's not going to appear like on like the top three names credited to this movie.
Mm-hmm. And not only is he not gonna, we're not gonna mention it, he's gonna show up and be like a villain.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he was even in Oppenheimer for a little bit, in almost like a bit part. But no, I think audiences have always been excited about the next Christopher Nolan project as long as since I guess Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people were there. I think if I remember correctly, even during those period, maybe in between those movies, he did The Prestige, and so uh, people have always been interested in what he has next. Maybe more so this
Mm-hmm.
time, coming off of the wild financial and critical acclaim of Oppenheimer, just to see if he can repeat uh, that historic, I guess, take that the movie did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think he himself, Christopher Nolan, likes to build kind of a mystique around his movies too. Like he kind of plays into it. Like he's not quite J.J. Abrams with his mystery box, but he does love keeping as much detail as possible, kind of under wraps about his movies for as long as possible to kind of build that anticipation. Um, like I know he's done that with the last several, kind of kept it as much under wraps as possible until as close as possible to like press time.
Yeah, I'm gonna post something on the newsletter. It's a pictures.substack.com where I talked to someone who edits trailers, movie trailers for a living, and going into kind of that field a little bit more. And he dropped a tidbit that like when Christopher Nolan sends stuff out for trailers, he sends it like out of order so that people can't figure out the plot of the movie, and you gotta just like piece it together from that. So obviously, he's very hands on with how his movie is marketed and presented to the world.
He's a very particular guy, which can be a positive and a negative, I think. But
as long as
he
he's
is who he
making,
is.
as long as he's making money for these companies, that like he can be as difficult as he wants to be, I guess.
Yeah, I just don't like his whole thing about like not making dialogue intelligible and thinking that's a good thing. I
Yeah,
I think that's just really crappy to do to for an accessibility standpoint.
yeah. I would be going back even to Interstellar. That was a very like high point of the movie where they're like, oh, can you figure out what Michael Caine is saying at this particular scene? And like, can we
Mm-hmm.
like play it in slow motion or then it turns into like, oh, are the sound designers like messing up? And it's no, that's specifically what Nolan has asked them to do.
All right. Well, shall we move on to our feature?
Yeah, sure. Do you have a little bit of preamble of John Carpenter to share?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I'll say that this episode was my idea because I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I've definitely seen a lot of his movies, not all of them, but a lot of them. And they're among some of my favorites. I think for me personally, he has one of the strongest batting averages of a director for movies that I love. So I think we're gonna talk about some of the ones of some of his movies that I really enjoy, but I think ideally we want to have kind of a smattering of his movies because I think he's primarily known for horror, but he kind of dabbles outside the lines in like science fiction and fantasy as well, and yeah, I mean,
In one case, he even made his own kung fu movie, right?
yeah, I mean, also he's a musician. I mean, I think that's really interesting. Like, he's not making movies anymore. He's gotten out of that game, and I think he's said many times in interviews like, "No, I'm done with that chapter." Um, Like I think if I made something now, it would just be shitty. So I'm not gonna not gonna bother. But he's still touring as a musician. And we'll talk more about that. I think with the first movie, Halloween, 1978 film Halloween. Um, but yeah, I always thought that was a really interesting aspect of his career too. That like he's so famous for being a director, but also really famous for being a musician and creating like an iconic score.
Right.
I would multiple iconic scores, but one in particular that everyone knows him for.
Mm-hmm.
So you wanna? I guess let's just dive right into Halloween. So do you want to do like plot summaries for some of these movies to just like do like a quick thing for people who haven't seen them?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. All right. So Halloween 1978, as I mentioned, written directed by John Carpenter, co-written by Deborah Hill, stars Donald Pleasance, Jamie Lee Curtis. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis, let's be honest, is the star, but Donald Pleasance is like a sizable role. Um,
Donald Pleasance is the selling point of this movie before Jamie Lee
right
Curtis became a
before people
star.
know exactly, yeah. And I'll do the IMDb one sentence, which I'm sure is lacking, but it gives us something to start with. So 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night, 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois, to kill again. Yeah, it's actually not bad as far as IMDb summaries go. Yeah, he's escapes. Donald Pleasance is like the doctor who is working with him in the psychiatric hospital, and so he's trying to chase him down, trying to find him, knowing that he's a violent guy who is gonna start killing. And Jamie Lee Curtis and her friends are just kind of like being typical like teenagers. Like she's like babysitting on Halloween, and he's stalking her and her friends, and yeah, I mean it's one of the early slashers. And I think it has a reputation for being as such, being very influential in the genre. Um, Mainly, one of the things is his iconic score that he created for it, John Carpenter's score for Halloween, which is very memorable. And it's just anytime I'm watching Halloween or thinking about Halloween, the score kind of pops in my head and just gets wedged in there. But what do you think? What do you think about Halloween, Max?
Well, that is a loaded question, Evan, because I love Halloween. Um, this is that might be like kind of I guess silly to say. Oh, I love this movie. A lot of people love this movie. I guess I'm part of the boat here. Um, it's just a simple premise, but since I've seen it and watched it almost every Halloween since I've seen it originally now, I have become obsessed with the lore and the background, and I've listened to podcasts about um little its and bits about the movie. It was originally supposed to be called like the Babysitter Murders, and the
Mm-hmm.
mask is like a William Shatner mask that they
Yep.
found and disfigured, and all these little trivia points, and how if you really dissect the movie, if and you should never dissect a horror movie, but if you do, you wonder like how Michael Myers could like. There's a famous scene near the end of the movie where like he sets up like this huge like elaborate thing for Jamie Lee Curtis to walk back into, and it's just like, wow, he's really artistic. He went through a
Yeah.
lot of work to drag like a tombstone all the way back so that she could see it.
Yeah. It's iconic for a reason. You know, I think it's really well done. The score is really effective. I mean, I think in a lot of ways this really launched Jamie Lee Curtis's career. Like she had done a couple of bit roles before this, but you know, I remember reading somewhere that John Carpenter was excited about kind of like helping her launch her career, much like you know Alfred Hitchcock helped launch her mother's career with The Birds, or you know made her extremely famous
In Psycho, yeah.
in a similar way. And yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis for a while after this really had a reputation as being a scream queen and being in you know horror. She went on to be in a string of horror movies of varying qualities
Right. I mean, she returned
before
for
coming back.
yeah, she returned for Halloween 2, and one movie that we won't talk about as much since Evan and I haven't seen it in a while is The Fog, another John Carpenter movie that
Yep.
she appeared in.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, she was certainly prolific, and now now she's an Academy Award winner. Um,
Yep. And come back to the franchise all these years later with the last, you know, the most recent trilogy, the David Gordon Green Halloween movies of varying qualities.
yeah. No, I mean, I still really like this, and like as I found like a lot of these horror movies, Evan, is like I like to watch the one that made them famous, and then like I don't really care to watch too many of the sequels.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
one is kind of enough for me. I did for Halloween. I think more recently, I finally watched the second one with young Jamie Lee Curtis, where she's in the hospital, and I was like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not as great as the first one. So,
Yeah,
um,
agreed. I saw it a long time ago, and yeah, it's not as good. John Carpenter really didn't want to do it. He kind of got like, you know, he's like, fine, I'll do it, just so someone else doesn't do it and do it crappy. But he didn't really want to make it. I
yeah,
think it's kind of obvious.
yeah, and but I really enjoy Halloween. But there's one movie inside of Halloween that Jamie Lee Curtis is actually watching, and that is the original black and white version of The Thing from Outer Space. And it's just funny that John Carpenter would either get the opportunity or make the opportunity to make a remake of that movie himself.
Yeah, great transition to the next movie we're going to talk about, The Thing, 1982. Um, I think this might be my favorite John Carpenter movie. Uh,
It's neck
it's an
and neck for
amazing
me.
horror movie.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'm more frightened of body horror anyway, so I generally think The Thing is scarier than Halloween. If we're marking
Mm-hmm.
like which one do we think is scarier, and it's also a fantastic science fiction movie. Um, you look at a lot of science
Yes.
fiction movies, and maybe Alien and The Thing are probably right up there as like the two scariest, in my opinion, uh, sci-fi horror movies. And it's cool that he was able to follow Halloween with another iconic movie. Unfortunately, the history of The Thing we'll get into. I guess I'll go into what the movie's about, Evan, because you did Halloween.
Sure.
Um, the Thing is kind of like there's this crew that's in the Arctic, and they're working on an experiment, and um, all of a sudden, like a dog is like running away from like a pack of other dogs or something, and um, of course, when you see a dog, you're like, "Oh, what's the matter? I'll take it in." Lo and behold, the dog has been infected by like some kind of alien parasite, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, all of a sudden, the parasite starts infecting people within. this scientific community. And uh, what makes it even scarier is that this organic, or this like kind of thing, if you will, can take
Mm-hmm.
on the body and features of other animals and other people. So you don't know
Yep.
whether or not you're actually talking to your friend, or if you're talking to this alien that could possibly kill
Yep. It's a shapeshifter.
you.
It's pretty freaky.
Yeah, and like
Um
it's really known for its creature effects, right, Evan? Like that, those really great um, costume and makeup designs and what have you is just really incredible.
yeah, it's incredible practical effects in this movie. Really goopy. I would use goopy as another word to describe this one. It's gory, it's goopy, it's so gross. All the different creature effects that are in this, the shapeshifter, because you see that like although it can take human or animal form, it's still got all it just shifts into just gross looking thing. There's like a crab like thing with like eyes that pop out like a snail, and just all kinds of nastiness. And I think, yeah, like you said, Max, that's definitely one of the selling points of this one is all the gross mutations of the thing. Um, it's one of the reasons I really enjoy this movie. I would say another one is a stacked cast, led by Kurt Russell, but like great supporting turns from like Keith David, Wilford Brimley, Richard Masur, just like a really solid group of people who are trapped in this research station together, and great sense of isolation and paranoia. It's just it hits it hits all the right notes for me.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it has those like epic hero moments too. That like, I think these Carpenter movies do a good job of that. Like, they give you these hero moments, and then afterwards they
Hmm.
kind of like stomp them out. Um,
Yep.
even like the aforementioned Halloween, we were like, oh well, Donald Pleasance came in and shot Michael Myers. He's dead. It's all over. He saved the day, and Michael Myers gets up and runs away. Um, Same thing with the thing here. Kurt Russell has like a flamethrower, and he seems like he's victorious, but really, is he all that victorious?
We don't know. I mean, I think that's another great thing about this movie is its ending. It's so bleak, but normally that would make me mad in a movie, but this movie does it so well that I love it. The fact that it's down to just Kurt Russell and Keith David, and they're staring each other down, and they think, well, at least one of us is the thing, but I don't know. We'll just sit here and freeze to death about it.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And unfortunately, it was one of those movies that took a long time to get cultural appreciation. Like the summer of '82 was difficult because E.T. kind of ate everything up,
Hmm.
famously, and like stuff like Blade Runner and The Thing kind of uh, got stomped on and had to wait a good while to get cultural and critical appraisal to say how great they actually are.
Well, I'm glad they eventually got the appreciation they deserved.
I think that same
Yeah.
summer, I think like before ET, that Poltergeist came out. So I mean, it was. I mean, we did an episode earlier, and it's the Pitcher's history about it. And it's just like one of those great summers.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of great movies to come out. I'll tell you what's not great. The prequel that they did that's also called The Thing
Oh yeah, that one was what,
with
2010.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Yeah, not good. Basically they just remade this movie but didn't do a good job of it. It just tells cuz in the opening, as you mentioned, there's a wolf that's escaping a guy in a helicopter who's shooting at it, and then the helicopter ends up crashing, and they figure out like, oh, it's these like Norwegian guys. They're over at their station. They realize that all this same stuff was happening over there, like, in the creature like devoured everybody, and the whole place like burned down. They like burned themselves down trying to kill it. So you see that backstory, and you're like, okay, this is the same movie, but not good. So
I mean, I guess the argument could be like, oh, it's been so many years since that came out, and what I do like about these movies that these like remakes or sequels that come out, they do bring attention to the classics, and people are like, oh, what are they actually like remaking and what have you, and maybe like that gives an uptick of people watching the originals.
yeah.
What kills me though is like when people watch the remakes and they're like, "Oh no, this was the original." I'm like, "What? Can you go back and like find the original, please?"
My head hurts just hearing that. Um, anything else you wanted to discuss about the thing?
No, I mean like one of my favorite scenes, we didn't talk about scenes too much yet, but one that scares me is this great scene where they had to get their blood drawn to like determine which one is if any one of them is infected,
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
it just like really uh I don't know. I'd say it kind of gives me the ick, and at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm like, it's really scary and interesting at the same time. So yeah, shout out to the thing and the thing testing.
That scene is incredibly tense.
Yeah.
I would say probably the tensest scene in the movie because they're just, like you said, that everyone's blood is in a petri dish and they are applying heat to it. And if it reacts, then they know that that person, like you said, is infected. Uh, and, certain people are tied up, other people are training weapons on them. It's just a powder keg type situation. And, yeah, things go pretty off the rails after that. Yeah, great scene. All right. So I guess we'll talk about Christine next, since that's literally chronologically next.
Did I write
Uh,
these in chronological order, or is that just how we ended up being like fortunate?
um, I'm not sure some of these are in chronological order because They Live, I think, came after Christine, but after Starman, which
Okay.
also we have on the list. I don't have a ton to say about Christine. I did see it recently. It had been on my list for a while. This one is about, based on the Stephen King story about the killer car. Um, I mean, like the one sentence IMDb is: a nerdish boy buys a strange car with an evil mind of its own, and his nature starts to reflect it. Yeah, like the nerd is played by Keith Gordon, who's played a few nerds back in the 80s. Um, and yeah, he buys this car and he becomes obsessed with it. Like he fixes it up, and then the car is like getting him to kill people and killing people itself because it's got a mind of its own and it's evil, like right from the assembly line. But I wanted to see this because it was a John Carpenter I hadn't seen, and I think for me the biggest thing to like write home about is the visuals in this movie. Like the cinematography is like chef's kiss, and all of the creature effects are extremely well done. Like they make the car like morph and change in ways that I'm like, how the hell did they do that? Because it looks so good.
Yeah, I don't think I was that much in love with this when I saw it, but I think like we weren't there for the marketing machine, Evan. And I was just looking up when Carrie
Mm-hmm.
came out, and knowing that that came out like 7 years earlier, and just like the Stephen King name is probably still like powerful at that point, and then you're matching King up with Carpenter. It's like, oh, from the creator of Halloween and The Thing comes a new horror masterpiece written by Stephen King. And I'm like, I can't. There must have been so much anticipation of actually watching Christine.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know if this was when Stephen King was in the heyday of his cocaine use, but can't speak to that. But yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot wrong with the plot of the movie. I think there's just some holes and some things that just aren't very fleshed out very well. But I did really enjoy all the cinematography and the effects. I thought they were, for me, what made this worth watching.
All right. Well, Evan, I want to jump around a little bit because
Sure.
I watched Big Trouble in Little China for the first time in honor of our John Carpenter discussion. This was a movie that I had on my radar for a while because, I generally heard a lot of people say they had a lot of fun with it, and it's not necessarily a
Mm.
movie that should be anywhere taken seriously. Um,
No.
but John Carpenter had his opportunity to make like his kung fu masterpiece, if you will, and um, it stars Kurt Russell again, which he worked with a lot, I think more than 4 or 5 times, anyways. And in this movie, Russell is a truck driver, and he's playing cards with a buddy of his, and he wins big, and then the guy's like, "Oh well, I don't have the money to pay you. Can you go to the can we make a stop at the airport before we head back to my place and I can give you the money?"
Mm-hmm.
And at the airport, they end up meeting uh, his his friend's would be fiance. Well, I'll take your word for it. It was Kim Cattrall then. Anyways, you must have IMDb in front of you.
I
Um,
do, yeah,
yeah,
but I also knew it was Kim Cattrall. I was like, wait a minute, I don't. In my head, also, I was like, man, I don't remember Kate Capshaw on this. I guess it has been a while since I've
yeah,
seen it.
yeah. So, anyways, he is instantly smitten with her and interested. And when everybody gets into trouble, and these guys who look like straight out of Mortal Kombat come down and uh, start capturing people, he gets involved. And it's funny, like he is kind of the auxiliary character, like where like he's us in this world
Yes.
because
Mm-hmm.
everybody else is like having lots of martial arts training, and it's just a world that he's like, oh, this is a turn over here, and wait, there's like um lots of groups against each other and turf wars going on. And I guess like at one point he like hits a guy with his truck, and he's like, oh, did I kill that guy? And lo and behold, he didn't. Um, so yeah, the movie is very silly.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
they like decide that they're going to go rescue Kurt Russell's friend's fiance, and so they go into like this compound, if you will, and um fight all these guys and get captured, and then they have to break out and escape. But oh wait, Kim Cattrall got left behind, and they have to go back. And all the while, James Hong, the legendary actor, I guess for me, he most recently appeared in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Um, he is the big bad in this movie, and his goal is
Mm-hmm.
to marry a woman of green eyes. And apparently, he's had a hard time finding a woman of green eyes for a lot of years. And all of a sudden, now he has two. The guy's fiance and Kim Cattrall both have green eyes. So he's like, I'm just gonna marry them both, and because I like them both. And so Kurt Russell and everybody else has to go in there and save them. And again, like I didn't look into it, and like, but I'm sure it's exactly where they got the idea for Mortal Kombat's Raiden, because there's this like henchman that has like the big straw hat, and he has like lightning coming from him, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's that character, identical. So
Yep. Yeah.
does
This is
does this ring a bell now that I
Yeah, yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen this. I actually was lucky enough to see it on the big screen once
no.
at the Brattle Theater in Cambridge, and that was a lot of fun. This is a fun movie to watch with a crowd.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because it's so silly, it's big and goofy, and I think a lot of what works well for me is that Kurt Russell is playing it very silly. Also,
Mm-hmm.
he's playing this kind of braggart kind of character who thinks that he's hot shit, but he's really like in way over his head throughout this entire movie. I seem to recall there's even kind of like a like a momentary like twist at the end where it's like, oh boy, oh boy, for Kurt Russell's character, if I'm remembering correctly. But
But
yeah,
I don't know.
it's goof.
I think he has to like take this magic potion because there's like this other like uh sensei type character who's like always been trying to get revenge on James Hong's character, and like he drinks like this magical potion and what have you.
Wasn't there some like monster or something like that that's like hitched a ride to his truck or something at the end?
The monster is like such a like minor piece of it. It's just like it kind of just shows up.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun movie. I love James Hong. I mean, I think he doesn't get enough respect in the acting world. He's probably one of the most prolific actors ever.
Yeah.
Like he's been in hundreds of projects, and he's in his 90s and he's still working. Like he's amazing, and I love that he plays the villain in this.
Yeah, like I do agree with you though. If I feel like I would have had a better time had I was watching it with like an audience or someone else like laughing along with it, because for me by myself watching it, it was just like, yeah, this is okay. I wasn't like really jumped up and down about it, but maybe if I watched it with a few people, that usually helps a lot of movies out, Evan, because I know
Yep.
like I like to buy movies from this label Vinegar Syndrome, which kind of releases like the bottom barrel movies like Tammy and the T-Rex and what have you.
Oh God.
And that movie would not be enjoyable to watch by myself, but like with six other people laughing at it, that's a good time. So
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, Tammy and the T-Rex, I know for sure that they've covered it on How Did This Get Made, and it's just exactly the kind of movie that you watch with the crowd or you talk about with the crowd because it's just so silly and so bad. Well,
and I should be clear
that's a
that
bummer that you weren't.
Big Trouble in Little China is not that. It is a better movie than
No,
that for sure.
no, but it wasn't quite working for you as
Yeah.
a kind of one-on-one viewer. It was not really your speed, which is a bummer, but it's understandable. I think it is very silly, and if that's just not working for you because you're just watching this by yourself,
Yeah.
I could see that.
Watching it by yourself for film homework.
Yeah. Yep. But did you say you watched something else for this episode?
No, I had meant to, Evan.
Oh, okay.
There was like other stuff that I wanted to catch up with. I have not seen, for the audience's knowledge, I have not seen Prince of Darkness or Assault on Precinct 13. And like, that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna watch. I was gonna watch Escape from New York again because the last time I watched it, I was very tired and I didn't make it through the picture. So I wanted to give it another opportunity before I like really qualify if I like it or not. So
Gotcha.
I definitely
Okay.
would like to see that again.
Yeah, it's been way too long. I also have not seen Prince of Darkness or Assault on Precinct 13, but it's been way too long since I've seen Escape from New York to talk about it intelligibly. But I do love that, Kurt Russell's character, Snake Plissken, went on to be inspiration for, Snake in the Metal Gear
Yeah.
Solid games. So that's pretty cool. We want to talk about Starman next.
Yeah, this one I've seen pretty recently. So why don't you tee it up and then we can get together on it.
Sure. Yep. So we'll do Starman, directed by John Carpenter. It stars Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen and Charles Martin Smith. And we'll give you the brief summary. An alien takes the form of a young Wisconsin widow's husband and makes her drive him to his departure point in Arizona. Distrustful government agents, along with a more ambivalent scientist, get pursuit in hopes of intercepting them. So yeah, Jeff Bridges is the Starman. Karen Allen is that widow, and yeah, it's a road trip kind of movie. It's very much, I feel, a departure from a lot of what John Carpenter typically had done at the time. Like in that it's a lot more kind of like an upbeat kind of movie. It's one of those like pull on the heartstrings kind of movies, much more in the vein of something I feel like Steven Spielberg would make than John
Mm.
Carpenter. But I also really liked it when I saw it. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but I thought it was really good. I remember liking it quite a bit, liking Jeff Bridges, liking Karen Allen, liking their rapport. Um, Max, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, it was funny when I really like Jeff Nichols' filmography, and he made a movie a few years back called Midnight Special. And I remember when it came out, people were like, "Oh, this is just like Starman," because in both movies, it's a road trip to try to bring an alien to its eventual departure point. And so like that's why maybe Starman has always been on my radar. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess like I really love how hard Jeff Bridges goes for this role because like he's pretty young when he's in this movie, and but like you can see his like acting ability in this. Let's say like if you've seen him like be goofy in movies and stuff, and thank God Jeff Bridges has been around for a long time, and Big
Mm-hmm.
Lebowski is one of his most famous roles. But I'd argue that he's doing like much heavier lifting with his acting in this movie because he has
Yeah.
the alien he's playing is very stoic, and if you've ever seen like those like fish out of water movies, that is also what this movie is because like his character is an alien and doesn't really know how to fit in our world, and does things that like are inappropriate, and um, just everybody has to go with it. I guess like I love the sentiment of this movie and everything, but I guess the creepiest part for me is that like she sleeps with him and she's like I'm pregnant, and I'm like, so you're pregnant with like the alien's baby of your dead husband? I'm like, that's kind of strange.
Yeah. That's definitely a little bit strange. That's for sure. I'd forgotten that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think like so they recently released it on 4K and like a Sony collection box, and apparently there was like a short-lived Starman TV series that like takes
Huh.
place like after the events of this movie, and like maybe it like stars like their son, and I don't know, that was the weirdest part of the movie for me, but on the whole I did enjoy it. And I haven't seen Karen Allen in too many things, but I liked her in this too.
Yeah, she was great. I feel like I wish that her career took off more because I feel like she had some kind of strong early performances, and then sadly, I feel like even though she kept working, she never quite got the recognition that she deserved.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. I guess this is such a choice. Uh, let's talk about In the Mouth of Madness next.
Okay.
Um, so this is a later John Carpenter movie from 1994. Um, this stars Sam Neill.
Post
It
Jurassic
also
Park.
has, yep, post Jurassic Park Sam Neill. Pretty strong supporting cast as well. Uh, what's this guy's name? Jurgen Prochnow. I've seen him in a bunch. David
Yeah.
Warner, of course, who's awesome. John Glover, who usually is kind of creepy. Bernie Casey, who I love. Charlton Heston. Pretty stacked cast. The IMDb summary is an insurance investigator begins discovering that the impact of a horror writer's books have on his fans is more than inspirational. That's very vague. But yeah, let's see what this other IMDb summary says. With the disappearance of hack horror writer Sutter Kane, all hell is breaking loose, literally. Author Kane, it seems, has a knack for a description that really brings his evil, creepy crawlies to life. Insurance investigator John Trent is sent to investigate Kane's mysterious vanishing act and ends up in the sleepy little East Coast town of Hobbs End. The fact that this town exists as a figment of Kane's twisted imagination is only the beginning of Trent's problems. Yeah, that's a much better summary of this movie and what's going on in it.
Yeah, and I mean like Evan, like when I saw this, it made me immediately think of more of a drama comedy, Will Ferrell and Stranger Than Fiction, right? Because
Yeah.
Sam Neill, for all intents and purposes, is a character in a Shutter Kane story. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that is the ultimate rub of this movie.
Right. And definitely more trippy and weird than typical John Carpenter. I think that's why we wanted to talk about this one, because it's definitely a very different vibe of a movie, a lot more psychological and out there, and that might work for you and it might not. Does it work for you, Max?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. I was like, oh, this is a pretty neat movie. Um, I didn't mind like some of the twisty things that are going on. At least I think that made it more interesting. And um, I'm a Sam Neill guy. I like his roles. You know, outside Jurassic Park. I know Hunt for the Wilder People. Um, there's this old British movie, My Beautiful Career or something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
really, he's great in that. I haven't seen what's that horror movie that he's known for appearing in. Um,
Oh, Event Horizon?
nope, not that one. The other
The
the other horror movie that he was in. Uh,
other horror movie that he was in. Oh, I think
Possession.
that was also on that list, that
Yes.
100
Yeah, number
best
67.
horror movies.
Um, so yeah, I've always liked Sam Neill, and he's really good in this, and he's entertaining to watch. And there's like an aside that I don't really like. There's a scene or sequence that I don't really love where like I guess he's getting in his car and he's trying to leave, and it's very obvious he can't, and like that kind of runs on a little bit too long for me. But
Mm-hmm.
all over cases, the movie moves at a pretty good clip and keeps you entertained throughout.
It's funny because I feel like for me this movie did not work, but I
No.
feel like a lot of that is it was just too weird for me.
Mm.
Sometimes a movie is just too weird, and this one was definitely it. I've liked Sam Neill. I've like you. I always enjoy when he shows up in things, and I actually really liked him in the series Apples Never Fall
Mm.
on Peacock, which came out in the past year. I thought he was really good in that. But yeah, this movie was just too out there for me in places. It just I wish it worked. I want it to work. I love John Carpenter and I love Sam Neill, and I don't know. Didn't really wasn't I wasn't vibing with it.
Well, you left one of the ones that has always been in conversations, at least in the last decade or so, and that's They Live. People like say, oh well, if you put on these glasses, like who are these people that you see around you, right? And like they've
Yep.
certainly, I don't think. I mean, let's face it this way. I don't think horror movies hide their ambitions of their political messages. I think uh, all of them are very pointed. I saw something the other day, Evan, that said within the last, well, this year, 2024, we had a lot of horror movies where the women in the movies have these like horrible forced births. I know that
Yep.
one of the ones that you're going to talk about is one of the ones that was included in that conversation, and they're like, "Oh, what was going on 2 years ago? Oh, the end of Roe v. Wade and what have you." So, um, I think obviously, politics definitely play a role in these horror movies and what's going on in the world, and They Live.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that like when you put on these glasses, you can see aliens. Maybe you could see the people who you're not sure what they're thinking.
Yeah, I think anybody who says that horror is not political or just became political recently doesn't watch enough horror or doesn't pay close enough attention to it, because horror uh, often is addressing politics and very real fears and concerns that people have in their lives, but they're exploring it through the genre. And yeah, this movie definitely wears its politics on its sleeve a bit. There aliens live among us, and only the people who put on these glasses can see who the real aliens are and see all of their subliminal messages that they're pumping through television and advertisements and telling us to obey and spend and
Yeah.
whatever other capitalistic messages they have. And yeah, it's this our guy who's a drifter. Our lead character is played by the wrestler Roddy Piper. He discovers these glasses, and he joins the movement to resist the aliens. And Keith David is also in this. Love the John Carpenter Keith David combo once again. This movie also has one of the longest, most brutal fight scenes I've ever seen in any movie or TV show, where Roddy Piper is trying to convince Keith David to put on the glasses, and he refuses, and they just beat each other to a pulp until he beats Keith David into submission into putting them on. It's a bonkers scene. I think there's multiple crotch kicks between the two of them. It's nuts.
Nuts, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. But I don't mind that this movie is very naked in terms of what it has to say politically. I like that it's so over the top and so cheesy, and like the dialogue in it is just it is just so over the top. I mean, we have Roddy Piper's probably most famous line, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." I mean, this is kind of stuff that like they were ripping off in the Duke Nukem games
Right.
with all these like one-liners and stuff. And I appreciate that it's just silly. Like it has something to say, but it's silly, and it's very silly and over the top. In the vein, I would say, of um, Big Trouble in Little China, but I think probably more accessible. But let me know if you disagree with that.
No, I think it's more accessible. I mean, it's definitely like something that I want to revisit, and like usually if something doesn't like vibe with me or I don't connect with it, I definitely wouldn't say that. I'd say like I would say like maybe it wasn't for me and I'm good and maybe I don't need to go back to it. But I remember when I saw They Live that I probably enjoyed myself and would like to see it again.
It's definitely I've seen it a couple times at this point. It's definitely worth revisiting. It's fun. It's a good time.
But
All right.
yeah, like you said, Carpenter, he's been living his life and away from movies. I think that does he provide scores for movies sometimes? Maybe he had a variation on his Halloween score for those Halloween trilogy movies.
Yeah, I think he's definitely contributed to the newer Halloween movies, or at least gotten credit for originating the score. I
There
don't
was
know if
some.
he's
I think there was something very funny recently where like someone was impersonating him on Letterboxd and like saying like he had another movie in the work or something, and he was like, "What the hell is Letterboxd?"
Yeah, he did. That's right. I think he said, "What the hell is a letterboxed?"
Yeah.
So at least he's got he may be retired from making movies, but he's still making music. And he's still got a great sense of humor, which I appreciate about him.
Yeah.
So good for him. All right. So before we move on to the what we've been watching, we'll just take a minute to plug where you can find the show. You can listen to us wherever you get podcasts, and we also have our website. It's thepictures.com, right, Max? Or it's thepictures.libsyn.com.
Yeah, I think that's where it's currently living. If you want to go there,
Yep.
also, if you want to find us on YouTube, all our current episodes are up there under the It's the Pictures banner.
Yep. So you can catch us on YouTube if that's where you like to do your podcast listening. And then if you want to reach out to us, chat with us about John Carpenter or anything else we talk about on the show, we are on Twitter. We're on Blue Sky. It's the Pick Pod in both those places, right, Max? Or Blue Sky is where it's the pictures.
Yeah, it's the
Dot Blue
pictures.
Sky.
I think it's the pictures. Bsky.social is how they do their elongated usernames, and then at Twitter X where it's the Pick Pod.
That's right. Yeah. And then if you want to get in touch with us, you can also send us an email where it's thepictures@gmail.com. And also we have our great Substack that Max runs. And it's a lot of original content that he is writing, reviews, commentary on different entertainment news, reviews of new like Blu-ray releases, things like that, and all sorts of other good stuff. And Max, I think you wanted to plug something that you're working on for the next issue, right?
Yeah, so most recently I did a review of the new um, Apprentice movie about Roy Khan and Donald Trump's relationship in the 70s and 80s that's now playing in theaters. Outside of that, I have by the time you hear this podcast, it will be up. A interview I did earlier this year with a guy who works on movie trailers. He cut one of the TV spots for the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And we just talked a little bit about movie trailer creators and how I feel that they don't get enough credit for this big part of the movie marketing machine. So hopefully you check that out.
Yeah, check it out, listeners. If you're not subscribed already, subscribe to the newsletter. There's lots of great content that Max is putting out over there.
Evan, did you
And
know that our good friends at IFF Boston have announced their slate for their fall focus? And yeah, if you're at the end of October, I think it's October 31st through now November 4th, they'll be running a fall focus festival with some of the more exciting releases coming out in November, December, and beyond. So it's a great opportunity to see some movies there. I know, Evan, to newsletter subscribers, they sent out the slate, and one of the movies I really wanted to see, The Brutalist, is playing November 4th on the 70 millimeter film stock that's been going around, and I'm gonna make that appointment viewing on that Monday the 4th for sure.
that's great. Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me about that. I did see the news. I didn't get a chance to check out the full slate, but we've mentioned Independent Film Festival Boston or IFF Boston here before. They put out a really great festival every year, but then they also do this great fall focus where they, do kind of like a mini festival where they show a lot of really awesome movies that are almost certainly going to be part of the awards conversation. So it's this really wonderful opportunity to check out these movies, before your friends, before they get released. And so you can, be in the know and be talking about them and, have the inside scoop before they actually get released later on and more people start talking about them. So definitely worth checking that out.
Yeah, it's nice to be with like-minded individuals, Evan. Like, I know you had an opportunity to see Megapolis with a packed house because it was like a screener or what have you. But like
Mm-hmm.
once people started seeing it in theaters on their own, maybe it was like theaters of 10. And I think it just might have been more fun to be in a packed house. And certainly most of these film festivals, all the films typically sell out, and you get to experience them in packed houses. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking out that list. But I'm glad you're gonna go see The Brutalist. I know you've been excited to see it.
Yeah, Evan, like, I know this is an aside. It's like normally I go to TIFF and I have a lot of movies that I've seen already, so it's like not as pressing for me to go to many fall focus films because I've seen a few of them. But
Mm-hmm.
this year I didn't take in any film festivals, so I'm like, oh sweet, I have so much to catch up with, and like I could spend like a whole day there on the Saturday or Sunday for sure. So. Just waiting for the schedule of what times and places they're going to be. Actually, all the movies are going to be at the Brattle outside of the Brutalist, which is going to be at the Somerville Theater. So,
Good stuff. Good stuff. So, what have you been watching lately, Max?
yeah, so Second Sight, which releases some great transfers of, I wouldn't say necessarily old movies. They did It Follows pretty recently on 4K. Maybe an eclectic collection. They released a 4K of the 1980s movie The Hitcher, starring
Ooh.
Rutger Hauer, and I had never seen this before, and like it has like a cult classic kind of reputation, Evan,
Yep.
of like it didn't get like a lot of attention when it first came out, and like, but people kind of dig it, and yeah, I kind of dig it too. Like, it stars, I guess, the older brother from ET as like the lead. I was like, I didn't know like this guy had a film career. I guess he was in The Outsiders
Oh,
too.
oh, C. Thomas Howell. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was kind of medium in the 80s. Some people kind of knew him in the 80s, but his career never, went really much further after that.
Yeah, he so the Second Sight did a really good job of getting a lot of people on board to do interviews during this release for The Hitcher, and he does an interview on it, and I was like, oh wow, look at this guy where he is now. Um, and so it kind of starts like you'd imagine. The Hitcher, this guy is going across country. He's in the desert, and he comes across a guy, and he's like, oh, what the hell, I'll give him a ride. And he soon discovers like the guy has like serial killer tendencies,
Yep.
and um luckily he is able to get out of the situation through some miracle. And the movie could end there, like 20 minutes into it. He could like go off a different direction, or like try to get away from this guy as much as he can, but he stays on the path. And lo and behold, he runs into him again and again.
Yeah.
And the guy, is a killer. He just kills people relentlessly. And he sees it as he knows this young kid doesn't have a lot going on, and he uses him as like a scapegoat, if you will. And the kid is like seen as the serial killer. And so not only is he running away from Rutger Hauer, but he's also running away from the police. So
Yep.
he's in big shit.
Yeah. Did you like it, Max?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, and it's like it has like a really good director of photography. The guy who he worked on Fury Road. So I was like, oh shit, this movie must look excellent. So I was really into that, and it's creepy, but like it doesn't hit you over the head with it. I mean, in the special features that I was watching, they're like, oh, Rutger Hauer like murders this family and a small child. But the filmmakers and everybody didn't feel like it was important to show you that, because like it's
Hmm.
gruesome enough. So like they show you like just like the blood dripping out of the car on his shoe, and they're like, that's kind of enough to let you imagine like how gruesome it was. Or there's this famous part later in the movie start, because Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think, is in it,
Yep.
and she's like tied up between trucks, and the threat is like, oh, he's gotta like drive away, and she's gonna be like ripped in half. And like, you know they go so far as to not show it, that you're like, did it really happen? And like you're like, oh, she doesn't appear anymore, and like everybody's somber about it, and you're like, yeah, I guess it did. But um yeah, it's very much like it leaves it to your imagination.
Nice. I'm glad you liked this movie. I saw it a few years ago. I don't even remember why. I think it had just been on my list for a while, and I loved it. I thought it was really tense, very well done. Rutger Hauer is scary as hell, in that like you can't escape him. Like you're gonna have to kill him because he's gonna try to kill you first. Like there's no running from this guy. You have to confront him. And yeah, I remember being really shocked to hear that this was like a made for TV, like made for HBO movie. It didn't have like a theatrical release, and I thought, wow, this movie's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
um I guess like so they couldn't sell it in region A, which is our region, because like after all the work on the restoration was done, the distributors here wanted to release the restoration themselves. So if you want the Second Sight release of all the special features, you should buy it through like a third party, like specialty shop like Diabolic DVD or Orbit DVD. Otherwise, they're having a more stateside release that's just kind of pretty much bare bones with the restoration.
Huh. Okay, that's good to know. Sweet.
So, Evan, what have you been watching?
I think I teased it a little bit earlier in the episode, but it's kind of my religious horror phase. Yeah, I recently caught up with Apartment 7A, which is a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. Um, stars it's written and directed by Natalie Erica James, and it stars Julia Garner and Diane Wiest. And yeah, I also rewatched Rosemary's Baby immediately afterwards because it was right there on Paramount. It said, "Hey, do you want to watch Rosemary's Baby?" And I said, "Yes, I do." Also, I wanted to try and see how well they connected the dots between the two, which they did. I think they did a pretty good job with this prequel. Julia Garner plays Terry Giannoffrio, who you meet very briefly in Rosemary's Baby. Mia Farrow's character meets her in the laundry room, and you find out that she's been staying with the Castavets in that scene, and then later she's dead on the sidewalk, and that's part of the plot. So this is all of her Terry's backstory, who she is, where she comes from, how she hooks up with the Castavets, and yeah, it's as you suspect in a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. They got to her first and tried to impregnate her first, but shocker, it's not. I mean, it's not a surprise. She's dead in Rosemary's Baby, so she learns what's going on and kills herself. But it's still, I thought, was pretty well done in terms of being a prequel. I thought Julia Garner was great in it. I liked Diane Wiest as the Ruth Gordon character in this. I think she had tough shoes to fill and a tough choice as an actor. How much she needed to kind of hew closely to Ruth Gordon in her performance, and I think she found some ways to be intimidating in her own way. There's, I think, a few scenes where she's very effective and very intimidating and very creepy and menacing. So yeah, I definitely dug it.
Was this like a prequel series, or was it just like a quick movie?
Oh, it's a movie.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have specified. Yeah, it's a movie. It was released, I believe, directly to Paramount Plus, where you could watch it. So that's how I saw it.
But it's still okay, right? Because like sometimes these movies are like, you're like, oh, there's a reason why they show up directly on streaming services.
Yeah, I thought this was solid. I really liked it quite a bit. I did talk about it with my co-hosts on Spoiler Piece in our Patreon segment last week. They weren't as big, they weren't as into it as I was, but I would recommend it. I would definitely say see Apartment 7A. So, and then kind of related, I also saw Immaculate, which is another pregnancy themed horror movie from this year. Religious pregnancy themed horror movie about it stars Sydney Sweeney, who is a nun who is taking her vows at this convent in Italy, and she's becomes pregnant, and things are not right. Things are just weird going on with her, and it's creepy. And I would say I liked it. I didn't think it was quite as good as The First Omen. I think that was definitely a much more effective movie in this vein, telling a very similar story about a nun finds out she's pregnant with some type of monstrous baby. I don't remember if this movie implies that it's specifically like a demon, but it's definitely something as bad is going on here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought it was solid. I think I was expecting more guts and gore because I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this one a lot. Like, oh man, Immaculate's intense. And so when I saw it, I was kind of, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but I think I had very like high expectations as to what I was going to be seeing. And I just thought, okay, no, this is a really solid horror movie.
Yeah, that's funny because I don't think I talked about it at all, Evan, but like I decided to watch Longlegs recently because I was like, oh, this was like a really super buzzed about movie we talked about over the summer at the box office and everything. I was like, I thought this movie was supposed to be scary. I'm like, I was like, the plot itself is like kind of like unnerving, but like outside of that, I was like, this is not a scary movie. I'm like, this is barely even a thriller, and I was very disappointed by Longlegs.
Well, that's a bummer. That's been on my list to check out too. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
No, because I think it was just like marketed wrong. Like they Neon made it seem like it was like this great big horror movie, and it worked for getting people out to see it. But
Mm-hmm.
actually seeing it and then like saying to yourself, was this really a horror movie? I was like, that's not that scary.
No.
I think like, let's say a horror adjacent movie like is like Yorgos Lanthimos' Lobster. I think that movie is super creepy and upsetting. If you want to watch something that like is not a horror movie but could easily be in that ballpark.
I've still never seen The Lobster.
Oh, it's an upsetting movie.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
I've also heard Kinds of Kindness's latest is kind of upsetting too. So I'm like, I don't need to see that.
Yeah, I think I'm probably gonna be a pass on that one from what I've heard about it.
Yeah. All right, Evan.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been watching some horror movies. John Carpenter, certainly his horror movies have shown up on these greatest horror movie charts. I know Halloween and The Thing are certainly on them, and people are very fond of movies like The Fog and various fondness of Christine and In the Mouth of Madness. So those are 5 movies, anyways, of his filmography that I think would touch upon the horror realm. And if you're looking for a John Carpenter movie to watch during this spooky season, those are pretty good choices.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
All right. Evan, do you want to head us out of the gate here?
Yeah, sure. So this has been our episode of It's the Pictures, episode 180. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our conversation about John Carpenter. We'd love to hear from you. What's your favorite John Carpenter movie and why? We'd love to hear about that from you folks. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Max, thank you for joining me on this John Carpenter adventure. And we'll see you in the next episode.
All right. Thanks, everyone.